In the distant future, where the stars have become interstellar highways and humanity has reached the far reaches of the galaxy, an epic story is about to unfold before your eyes. Imagine a universe where time is relative, where ancient civilizations hold secrets that could destroy or save what's left of humanity. Here, in this vast cosmos, you'll meet Cale Ardent, a space explorer whose life will change forever when he discovers a mysterious artifact floating at the edge of a forgotten nebula. This is not just a journey through space, but also through time, the human soul, and the limits of imagination. Prepare to embark on a cosmic odyssey filled with political intrigue, epic battles between advanced civilizations, and the eternal conflict between technological progress and the very essence of what it means to be human. Are you ready to discover the secrets that lie beyond the stars? The echo of the stars begins now. The scientific exploration vessel Aurora's Grace sailed silently through the cobalt-blue veil of the Orion Nebula, its quantum thrusters pulsing with an almost hypnotic cadence. Cale Ardent watched from the main observation dome, his fingers unconsciously drumming against the reinforced glass as he took in the celestial spectacle spread out before him. It had been 3 standard years since he left Earth, 3 years of expeditions with no significant results, but something about this region of space unsettled him deeply. Captain Ardent, the soft but authoritative voice of Aria, the ship's artificial intelligence, interrupted his thoughts. We are detecting anomalous readings in Sector Delta 7, energy patterns that do not correspond to any known natural formation. Cale turned to the holographic console floating in front of him, where complex data was beginning to materialize. The AI was right. The fluctuations were too regular to be the product of cosmic chance. He activated the visual amplification system and adjusted the gravitational sensors. That was when he saw it, a metallic object half hidden among the swirls of interstellar gas, emitting a faint pulsation that seemed to synchronize with the beating of his own heart. "Prepare a shuttle," Cale ordered, his scouting instincts sharpening, "and notify the Galactic Council. This could be something important." The next few hours passed in a controlled flurry of activity. Aurora's Grace's science team worked tirelessly, analyzing every scrap of information they could glean from the artifact before approaching. It was obvious that it did not belong to any civilization known to the universal record. Its surface reflected light from nearby stars at impossible angles, as if defying the very laws of physics that govern the observable universe. As Cale and his research team finally boarded the shuttle and approached the object, a sense of awe mixed with fear began to take hold. The artifact was approximately 200 meters in diameter and appeared to be composed of some kind of unknown alloy that changed color, depending on the angle of view. But most disconcerting was the series of symbols etched into its surface, glyphs that seemed to move slowly, as if breathing. "This can't be real," muttered Dr. Elena Voss, the team's lead xenolinguist, as she scanned the glyphs with her analysis device. "It's as if the artifact itself is somehow alive." The shuttle gently touched down on a platform that seemed to suddenly materialize on the surface of the object. Cale felt a chill run down his spine as he led his team toward the entrance that had silently opened before them. The air within was strangely warm and charged with an energy that could be felt on the skin. As they penetrated deeper into the artifact, the walls began to light up with patterns of light that seemed to respond to their presence. Measuring instruments began to fail one after another, and communications with Aurora's Grace abruptly cut off. But what truly chilled their blood was when they reached the central chamber. At the heart of the artifact floated a perfect sphere of pulsating light, surrounded by what appeared to be slowly rotating 3-dimensional constellations. And then, without warning, a voice echoed in their minds, not through their ears, but directly in their thoughts. "They have arrived," the voice said, deep and resonant, filled with a wisdom that seemed to extend beyond human understanding. "The guardians of the threshold are here." The team looked at each other, frozen by the impact of that statement. Cale stepped forward, his military training fighting against the shock that threatened to consume him. "Who are you?" he asked, surprised that his voice sounded so firm. "We are not who we were," the entity replied. "We are the echoes of a civilization that existed before the first dawn of your species. We leave this as a warning and as an opportunity." Three-dimensional constellations began to morph, displaying visions that seemed to come from different points in time and space. Interstellar wars, planets consumed by artificial singularities, entire civilizations reduced to cosmic dust. But they also showed moments of incredible beauty and technological achievements that defied the imagination. "The universe is a delicate fabric," the entity continued. "Your destiny is intertwined with others yet to emerge. This artifact contains the knowledge necessary to prevent self-destruction, but also the power to hasten it." Elena cautiously approached the sphere of light, her hands shaking as she activated her universal translation device. "Why are you showing us this now? Why to us?" "Because you have reached the tipping point," the entity replied. "Your technological development has outstripped your moral maturity. You must choose, evolve or perish." As the team processed this revelation, Kale felt a strange connection to the entity, as if he could sense its weight, its responsibility, its loneliness. For millennia, it had waited, watching the development of countless civilizations, some of which had taken the wrong path. "We'll need time to understand all of this," Kale finally said. "Time is a luxury not always granted," the entity replied. "But we will give you what we can. The knowledge you seek is here, but it must be earned, not simply taken." Suddenly, the chamber began to fill with complex holograms, mathematical equations that seemed to dance in the air, diagrams of technology that defied all conventional logic. The team scattered, each member absorbed in different aspects of the knowledge presented to them. For what seemed like days, though their internal clocks indicated only hours had passed, the team worked feverishly, absorbing as much knowledge as their minds could process. Kale found particular fascination in a set of coordinates that seemed to point toward a completely unexplored sector of the galaxy. This could change everything," Elena murmured as she analyzed a genetic sequence that seemed to promise a cure for every known disease. "But it could also be dangerous, too powerful to fall into the wrong hands." "Then we must make sure it doesn't fall into the wrong hands," Kale replied with renewed determination. "We must protect this, study it, learn to use it responsibly." The entity seemed to sense his resolve. "You have shown initial worth. But remember, the real challenge will not be mastering this technology, but mastering your own instincts. Knowledge without wisdom is a dangerous burden." With these words, the artifact began to vibrate gently, and a dimensional door opened in front of them. It did not lead back to their shuttle, but to a completely different place, a world covered in crystalline structures that shone with their own light. "Welcome to the first threshold," the entity announced. "Here your true test will begin." With no time to hesitate, Kale led his team through the portal, knowing that nothing would ever be the same. What they would find on the other side would test not only their skills and courage, but the very essence of what it meant to be human in a universe far more vast and mysterious than they could have ever imagined. The crystalline world spread out before them was an architectural marvel that defied conventional description. Structures seemed to grow organically from the ground, fusing perfect geometry with natural forms into a visual symphony that made every step an almost religious experience. The air was charged with a palpable energy, and every surface reflected light in patterns that seemed to follow invisible musical rhythms. This can't be real," Dr. Marcus Chun, the team's xenobiologist, muttered as he scanned the surroundings with his portable equipment. "The molecular composition of these crystals seems to be constantly changing, as if they were alive." Kale watched as the crystals responded to his presence, shifting their brightness and color in patterns that seemed deliberate. "We are not alone here," he declared, his hand instinctively moving toward his weapon, though something told him that violence would be futile in this place. As if responding to his thought, figures began to materialize within the crystalline structures. They were not physical beings in the traditional sense. Their forms fluctuated between solid and energetic states, as if they were made of pure, cohesive light. Their faces, if they could be called that, seemed to contain entire galaxies in miniature. Explorers, one of the entities said, its voice echoing simultaneously in every language known to the team. You have crossed the first threshold. You must now face your first test, understanding the true nature of reality. Before they could ask a question, the landscape changed dramatically. They were no longer in the crystalline world, but floating in the void of space, surrounded by a million threads of light that seemed to connect in infinitely complex patterns. This is the fundamental fabric of a universe, another entity explained. Each thread represents a possible timeline, a decision made or not made. Your task is to identify the line that leads to the survival of your species. Elena and her technical team began working frantically, trying to map the patterns, but they soon realized that this was not a purely logical problem. Every time they tried to follow a specific thread, it branched off into new possibilities, creating an endless maze of decisions. This doesn't make sense, Dr. Chin protested. It's like the universe itself is playing a game with us. Precisely, one of the entities replied. The universe does not operate according to fixed rules that can be understood only by the rational mind. You must learn to listen to your intuition, to sense the underlying currents of reality. Kale closed his eyes, allowing his consciousness to expand beyond his physical limitations. He began to sense patterns in the flow of energy, resonances that seemed to harmonize with certain timelines. It was like learning a new language, but one that was experienced rather than intellectually understood. 200 standard years into the future, he finally announced. A massive ecological crisis in the Alpha Centauri sector. If we intervene correctly at that time. Exactly, an entity confirmed. You have begun to see beyond the veil. But remember, every action creates new ramifications. The real challenge is to anticipate the consequences of your choices. The team spent what seemed like weeks in this altered state of consciousness, learning to navigate the currents of time and probability. They found that their own thoughts and emotions directly affected the patterns they observed, confirming that reality was not something external and immutable, but a dynamic construct influenced by consciousness. This changes everything we knew about physics, Elena mused as she documented her observations. Causality is not linear. The past, present, and future are intrinsically connected. Finally, the entities announced that they had completed the first phase of their test. The team returned to the crystalline world, but now the structures seemed more defined, more solid, as if their understanding had literally transformed the reality around them. Your next test, the main entity announced, will be to confront your own deepest fears and desires. Only those who can reconcile their true selves with their potential may proceed. One by one, the team members were led into separate chambers. For Kale, this test proved to be the most challenging of all. He found himself facing alternate versions of himself, one where he had abandoned space exploration to live a quiet life on Earth, another where he had achieved fame and power at the cost of his principles, even one where he had never been born, showing him the impact his decisions had had on the course of history. True leadership, his wiser self told him, is not about taking the easy way out, but about having the courage to do the right thing even when no one is looking. When they finally emerged from their respective trials, the team seemed to have changed on a fundamental level. Their interactions were more sincere, their decisions more considered, their understanding of the universe and themselves much deeper. You are ready for the next phase, the entities announced. But remember, the knowledge you have acquired so far is only the beginning. The real challenge is yet to come. With these words, a new portal opened before them, revealing a panorama that made even the wonders they had seen so far seem insignificant. A vast orbital ring floated in space, surrounding an artificial sun that pulsed with an energy that seemed to contain the entire spectrum of universal knowledge. The Eternal Archive, the entities explained, Herein lies the accumulated knowledge of all civilizations that have reached this point. But beware, access to this knowledge requires a price. Kale looked at his team, seeing in their eyes the same mixture of fear and determination that he felt in his own heart. He knew that what they would find there could change the fate of humanity forever. But he also knew that the path to that knowledge would be the most difficult one they had ever faced. With one last look at the crystalline world that had been their testing ground, the team moved toward the portal, knowing they were entering an entirely new chapter in their cosmic odyssey. The Eternal Archive was vaster than any human mind could have conceived. Floating in space like a gigantic orbital ring, its structure seemed to be made of matter and energy intertwined in infinite fractal patterns. Every inch of its surface contained trillions of times more information than the entire data network of the Galactic Federation combined. This is impossible, Dr. Voss muttered as his instruments tried and failed to measure the dimensions of the archive. According to my calculations, this structure should collapse under its own gravitational weight. It seems our laws of physics don't apply here, Kale replied, watching as the ring seemed to expand and contract simultaneously, as if breathing a life of its own. I think we're seeing the physical manifestation of concepts we can't even name yet. As they drew closer, small probes of energy began to break off from the ring, floating toward them like cosmic fireflies. When one of these probes touched Kale's skin, his mind was instantly flooded with a flood of information. Technical, philosophical, scientific, cultural knowledge, all presented in a form his brain could process, if only barely. It's like the knowledge has always been there. Elena gasped as she experienced the same thing. We just needed to learn how to access it. The probes began to cluster together, forming a complex pattern around the team. Then, a voice echoed in their minds. Not a single voice, but the chorus of billions of voices, each representing a civilization that had reached this point in its evolution. "Explorers," said the chorus, "you have proven yourself worthy of the right to access the knowledge contained here. But you must understand, with this knowledge comes a responsibility that surpasses anything you have ever faced before." A shared mental image appeared in everyone's mind. Civilizations that had gained access to the Eternal Archive and used its knowledge to destroy themselves. Other images showed societies that had prospered, rising to new levels of understanding and cooperation. The price of knowledge, the chorus continued, is the acceptance that your species can no longer exist in isolation. You must join the galactic community on a fundamental level, sharing not only technology, but culture, philosophy, and purpose. Kale felt the weight of this statement. For centuries, humanity had struggled to maintain its independence, resisting full integration with other advanced species. But now he understood that this isolation was exactly what had limited its development. "We are ready," he declared, speaking for both his team and all of humanity. "We are willing to pay the price." The choir seemed to consider this for a moment that felt like an eternity. Then the ring began to spin faster and faster until it became a whirlwind of light and energy. From the center emerged a figure, or rather, an amalgam of figures, each representing a facet of universal knowledge. "Your first lesson," the figure announced, "will be to understand the true nature of consciousness. For only those who understand what it means to be conscious can handle the power that is about to be bestowed upon them." The team was transported to a new dimension of existence, where matter and energy were fluid, where time and space bent and twisted according to the whims of perception. Here, they learned that consciousness was not a mere byproduct of brain activity, but a fundamental force of the universe, as basic as gravity or electromagnetism. "Everything that exists is conscious at some level," one of the guiding entities explained. "From subatomic particles to the largest galaxies. The difference is only one of degree and complexity." For what seemed like subjective decades, the team explored this new understanding. They learned to communicate with the stars, to feel the pulse of black holes, to hear the songs of nebulas. They discovered that every thought, every action, sent ripples through this network of universal consciousness. This explains so much, Dr. Chan mused as he watched his own thoughts directly affect the fabric of space-time around him. Our technology, our evolution, everything has been influenced by this web of consciousness that we didn't even know existed. Finally, when the team had absorbed as much as their minds could handle, they were returned to normal space, just outside the eternal archive. But now they saw the universe with entirely new eyes. They could sense the connection between all things, from the tiniest quark to the largest galactic superclusters. "You understand now," said the chorus of voices. "The real challenge will not be to use this knowledge, but to share it. For the fate of your species and many others depends on your ability to teach what you have learned." Kale looked at his team, seeing in their eyes the same transformation he felt in his own being. They knew the road back home would be long and difficult, filled with resistance and fear. But they also knew that they were no longer the same humans who had set out on the Aurora's grace. "We have work to do," Kale said finally. "An entire universe to awaken." With these words, the team began their journey home, knowing that what they had learned would forever change the course of galactic history. But they also knew that this was just the beginning. The real challenge would be implementing this knowledge into a society that was not yet ready to accept it. As the exploration vessel moved away from the eternal archive, Kale and his crew began to experience an even deeper transformation. The knowledge they had gained had not only expanded their minds, but had also fundamentally altered their perception of reality. Each star they passed was no longer simply a distant point of light, but a sentient being with its own cosmic song. Each planet they orbited was no longer just a mass of rock and metal, but a living, breathing, growing organism. "It's like we can see the source code of the universe," Elena mused as she watched the fundamental equations of physics visually manifest themselves in her field of vision. "But it's also like the universe itself is learning through us." The team began to develop new technologies based on what they had learned, but these innovations were unlike anything humanity had created before. Instead of machines that dominated nature, they created devices that worked in harmony with the fundamental forces of the universe. They developed communication systems that not only transmitted information, but also shared sensory and emotional experiences directly between minds. "This is beyond telepathy," Marcus explained as he tested a prototype neural interface. "It's like we can share our very essence with other beings." But with this new level of understanding came new challenges as well. They began receiving messages from other civilizations that had detected their evolutionary shift. Some saw humans as a potential threat, a species that had reached a level of understanding that normally require millennia of gradual development. Others saw an opportunity to establish a new era of intergalactic cooperation. "We have to be extremely careful," Kale warned during a strategy meeting. "The knowledge we possess could destabilize the balance of power in the entire galaxy." The situation became even more complicated when they began to detect anomalies in the fabric of space-time. Small tears that seemed to be related to their growing understanding of reality. It was as if by expanding their consciousness, they were also expanding the boundaries of what was possible in the physical universe. "This could be what the entity called the price," mused Elena as she analyzed the data. "Every time we deepen our understanding, we fundamentally alter the structure of the universe." The team had to develop new ways of interacting with reality itself, learning to weave the rips they were creating. They found that this required perfect coordination between all team members, as if they were acting as a single distributed organism. "It's like the universe is training us for something bigger," Marcus suggested as they worked to repair a particularly complex anomaly. "Maybe it's part of a larger evolutionary cycle." It was during one of these repair operations that they made an even more profound discovery. As they wove the fabric of space-time, they began to perceive larger patterns, an underlying structure that connected all the advanced civilizations in the galaxy. It was as if there was a galactic web of consciousness, with each species contributing its own unique perspective. "This is what it means to be part of the galactic community," Kale realized as he experienced this connection for the first time. It's not just sharing technology or commerce. It's sharing the fundamental experience of existence. The team began to establish deeper contacts with other species, sharing not only technical knowledge, but also cultural and philosophical experiences. They discovered that each civilization had its own unique way of perceiving and understanding the universe, and that by combining these perspectives, they could reach levels of understanding that no species could achieve alone. "We are creating something completely new," Elena said as she helped translate a conceptual symphony created by a species of pure energy beings. A new form of existence that transcends the limitations of any individual biological form. But with this expansion of consciousness also came a new responsibility. They began to detect signs of an approaching threat, something that existed outside the galactic web of consciousness, something that was not connected to the fundamental structure of the universe. It could be what the entities called potential self-destruction, Kale speculated as they analyzed the data. Or it could be something else entirely. Whatever it was clear that their next test would be the greatest of all. They had learned to expand their consciousness, to connect with other species, to weave the fundamental fabric of the universe. But now they faced something that challenged even their new, expanded understanding of reality. "We are ready," Kale finally declared, looking at his team. "Whatever is coming, we will face it together, as representatives not only of humanity, but of the entire galactic community." With these words, the team readied their ship for the next chapter of their Odyssey, knowing that what they faced could determine the fate of the entire galaxy. But they also knew that, after all they had learned and experienced, they were no longer mere space explorers. They were guardians of universal knowledge, protectors of the galactic consciousness web, and perhaps, just perhaps, the architects of a new era in cosmic evolution. The approaching threat was unlike anything the team had faced before. It was not an invading fleet or a spatial anomaly. It was something more subtle, more insidious, a distortion in the very fabric of reality that was beginning to manifest itself as tiny inconsistencies in the galaxy's collective memory. "It's like the universe is forgetting parts of itself," Elena observed as she scanned the reports of various advanced civilizations. Fragments of history, technological advancements, even entire species are beginning to fade from the records. Kale felt a chill as he looked through the data. There was something deeply disturbing about the way these inconsistencies followed a precise pattern, as if someone or something was deliberately editing reality. The Dark Watcher, one of the entities that had been guiding them, murmured, "Has awakened." Before they could ask for an explanation, the space around them began to warp. Stars seemed to flicker and shift, and signals from other ships in the sector began to fade from sensors. "This isn't just a local phenomenon," Marcus reported as his instruments showed similar anomalies occurring simultaneously across the galaxy. "It's as if the very fabric of time-space is being rewritten." The team realized they were dealing with something that operated at a fundamental level of reality, something that could manipulate not only matter and energy, but causality itself. It was as if the universe had an immune system, and they had activated an autoimmune response. "The Dark Watcher is not an entity in the traditional sense," one of the voices in the galactic chorus explained. "It is an inherent function of the universe, a protective mechanism that eliminates elements it considers disruptive to the fundamental stability of reality." "That means we are a threat to the universe itself," Kale concluded, finally understanding the magnitude of what they were facing. "Our exponential growth in understanding and capability is being interpreted as an anomaly that must be eliminated." The team had to quickly develop new strategies to combat this threat. They could not use conventional weapons or standard technology. The Darko Observer operated on a level that transcended these concepts. Instead, they had to learn to directly manipulate the fabric of time-space, using the knowledge they had acquired in the Eternal Archive. "We have to think like the universe thinks," Elena suggested as she worked on a new neural interface. "We can't fight this directly. We have to convince reality itself that our existence is valid and necessary." They began to experiment with ways to talk to the fundamental fabric of the universe. They created energy patterns that resonated with the fundamental frequencies of reality, attempting to prove that their evolution was not a threat, but a natural expression of the universe's potential. That's when we made our most important discovery, Marcus recalled as he analyzed the data. The Dark Watcher wasn't trying to destroy us because we were a threat. It was trying to protect us from ourselves. It turned out that humanity's rapid advance was creating tensions in the fabric of time-space that could eventually have led to a cataclysmic rupture. The Dark Watcher was attempting to smooth out these tensions by eliminating the underlying causes, including, if necessary, humans themselves. We have to prove that we can handle this power responsibly, Kale said as the team developed a bold plan. We have to show that we can be part of the solution, not part of the problem. Working together with other advanced civilizations, they began to create a cosmic stabilization grid, a structure that would allow the universe to gradually adapt to changes in consciousness and technological development without creating destructive stresses. It's like building a new dimension of existence, Elena explained as she oversaw the construction of stabilization nodes at key points in the galaxy. We're creating a space where evolutionary growth can occur without threatening the fundamental integrity of reality. The process was incredibly complex and dangerous. At several points, it seemed as if the entire effort might collapse, taking with it not only the team, but possibly the entire galaxy. But as they progressed, they began to notice a change in the Dark Watcher's attitude. It's starting to recognize us, Marcus reported as he scanned the fluctuations in the fabric of time-space. It no longer sees us as a threat. It's seeing us as collaborators. Finally, after what seemed like years of relentless work, they managed to complete the stabilization network. The Dark Watcher, who had been their implacable adversary, now seemed to be working with them, helping to integrate the new structure.